in tonight's headlines. Authorities suspend all sewer cleaning works across Hong Kong following the death of 2 workers who allegedly inhaled toxic gas. Chief Executive John Lee says there is no need to legislate against fake news anymore after observing an improvement in the industry. And 10 naval officers are killed in Malaysia after their helicopters collided during a drill.
Two drainage workers have died after allegedly inhaling toxic gas in Sha Tin late last night. Police were called to Yuen Wah Playground just before midnight after the workers were found unconscious inside a 4-meter-deep manhole. The men, aged 26 and 34, were rushed to Prince of Wales Hospital. Resuscitation efforts were unsuccessful and they were pronounced dead 1 hour later. An initial investigation suggested the pair had breathed in hydrogen sulfide, a common type of sewer gas. 2 other colleagues were also hospitalized, although both were conscious.
工業意外咧係每個人都要共同去推進去改善嘅責任嘅。
Chief Executive John Lee expressed his deepest condolences to the victims' families this morning. He pledged to conduct a thorough investigation. The Drainage Services Department offered more details into the accident today through a statement. It said the 2 workers were recruited by a subcontractor which performed maintenance and construction work in Sha Tin. The 2 men were tasked with cleaning sewers using a high-pressure hose, and there was no need for them to enter the manhole. The contractor and subcontractor have been asked to suspend all related works and conduct safety inspections. Similar works across the city are also halted until necessary measures have been implemented to ensure safety at the worksite. This was the 2nd industrial accident of its kind in 7 months. 2 workers succumbed to their injuries last September after allegedly inhaling toxic gas at an underground construction site at the West Kowloon Cultural District. The accident prompted the Labour Department to update its code of practice regarding work in confined spaces, but the work is still ongoing. Janice Low, Cable News.
Chief Executive John Lee has declared there is no longer the need to legislate against fake news. The idea was first floated by his predecessor, Carrie Lam, after authorities blamed the social unrest in 2019 on the spread of misinformation.
如果可以用自律、行業提升同埋專業化去處理呢個問題。
I believe industry workers are professional and disciplined enough to uphold their integrity in news reporting, Lee said in his weekly media session. He added journalist groups have been working hard to combat false information, and there has been an overall improvement. His remarks came one day after Justice Secretary Paul Lam told the South China Morning Post that the need to introduce a fake news law has diminished following the implementation of Article 23 of the Basic Law. It was a restless night for Hualien residents after 3 earthquakes struck the eastern county in quick succession. The first tremor, with a magnitude of 6.0, was recorded at 2:26 a.m. A second quake, measuring 6.3 on the Richter scale, followed 6 minutes later. Residents said they couldn't go back to sleep, even there was no immediate danger. The Central Weather Administration of Taiwan believed the latest seismic movements were part of a series of aftershocks from a 7.2 magnitude tremor 3 weeks ago. At least 17 people were killed and more than 1,100 others injured in the strongest quake to hit the island in a quarter of a century. A number of buildings, which suffered extensive damage last time, have since been vacated. But before demolition works could begin, some structures, including this residential block, tilted further following the shocks last night. A hotel, currently undergoing renovation, suffered the same fate. Luckily, no injuries were recorded in both accidents. A third 5.8 magnitude quake hit Hualien at 8 a.m. as commuters were heading to work. School and work across the county were subsequently suspended. Traffic was also disrupted after roads were damaged and rockfalls were reported in mountainous areas. At least 1,000 aftershocks have already been recorded since the tremor on April 3rd. Seismologists have warned that the movements could last for a few months. Janice Yu, Cable News.
Ten military officers were killed in Malaysia after two helicopters collided in mid-air during training. Multiple witnesses on the ground captured the moment on video. From another angle, several helicopters were seen flying in formation before one of them veered sideways and clipped the rotor of another. Fragments scattered in the air before the aircraft crashed into a pole and an empty stadium. All 10 crew members on board were killed, all of whom were 40 or younger. No one was injured on the ground. The incident occurred at around 9:30 a.m. at a naval base in Lumut, a coastal town about 160 kilometers northwest of capital Kuala Lumpur. The two helicopters were rehearsing for a parade which would have marked the 90th anniversary of the Navy this weekend. Local media said the helicopters were training for the third time. Malaysia Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim expressed his condolences to the families of the victims. He said an investigation will be launched to find out the cause of the crash. Air accidents are not uncommon in a Southeast Asian nation. 10 people were killed last August after a small private aircraft crashed on a highway on the outskirts of Kuala Lumpur. 8 people on board perished, along with 2 motorists on the ground. Cheryl Yun, Cable News. After hours of heated debate, British lawmakers have reluctantly endorsed a bill which will clear the path for the government to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda. The controversial Safety of Rwanda bill was tabled last year after the Supreme Court ruled an attempt to deport asylum seekers to the East African nation as unlawful. The House of Lords have been trying to delay the bill's passage, submitting endless amendments. But the relentless opposition gave way after Prime Minister Rishi Sunak vowed to remain in session until the legislation was passed. Home Secretary James Cleverly hailed it as a landmark moment.
The Act will prevent people abusing the law by using false human rights claims to block removals. And it makes clear that the UK Parliament is sovereign, giving government the power to reject interim blocking measures imposed by European courts.
Authorities insist the deportation scheme will deter migrants from crossing the English Channel in small boats, a perilous and often fatal journey. But human rights advocates explain the problem was not so simple.
These are desperate people who are taking the only route that they believe is open to them to get to somewhere safe. The government needs to create new safe routes to get to the UK.
Under the scheme, Britain will pay Rwanda $618 million to house the asylum seekers, on top of a processing fee of over $200,000 for each migrant.
This is costing the taxpayer £500 million for a scheme that will only cover 1% of asylum seekers. This is an extortionate scheme. They should be putting that money into boosting our border security instead.
Sunak declared that the first flight to Rwanda will take off in 10 to 12 weeks, although legal challenges could derail that schedule. Another such flight 2 years ago ended in national embarrassment. Deportees were pulled off the plane minutes before takeoff after the European Court of Human Rights issued an injunction to stop their removal. Cheryl Yun, Cable News.
Hong Kong's inflation remained mild, although the pace picked up marginally last month. The consumer price index in March gained 2% from a year ago, less than market estimates. The increment was also slightly lower than the average growth of 1.9% during the first 2 months of the year. Leading the gains were alcoholic drinks and tobacco, which surged 17.7%. A pack of cigarettes cost around $16 more from late February after authorities raised the tobacco duty for the second year in a row. Accommodation costs also went up 3.1%. But electricity, gas, and water were nearly 9% cheaper. The government expects inflation to remain contained in the short term, as the upward pressure for domestic costs could be offset by the downward trend elsewhere in the world.